Okay, everyone. What we're going to do today is talk about the unification process that took place in Germany, and then in the second period, it'll cover the rise of Germany as a powerful European state. So, to start us off, we will begin with a couple slides from the PowerPoint on the unification of Germany. Okay, and what you see on this map is the end result of German unification, and that's pretty much what Germany looked like as we entered into World War I. It becomes a unified nation. Just to keep in mind that at one point Germany was made up of over 300 political units. It then is reduced down to about 30 by Napoleon, and then eventually down to 16 after Napoleon. So, where we will begin is first to talk about the history of the German states and why unification is not the easiest process for them. As I mentioned, they were previously combined to have 300 and some different political units, which had different princes, and during the Reformation, the Peace of Augsburg in 1555 allowed for Lutheranism to become a religion. So you had Lutherans, you had Catholics, and then at the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648, the Peace of Westphalia allowed for Calvinism. So you have a pretty diverse mixture of Catholics and different Protestants within the German states. Some German areas, such around Berlin, Frankfurt, they were very urbanized, while other areas were still rural agricultural societies. And then you also had different thoughts of government, some conservative, such as wanting a monarchy, and others more liberal, preferring a republic. So overall, they have a lot of things against them as they enter into the 1860s and their movement to try to unify together. Two countries on the outside looking at this that are not in favor of unification of Germany is France, and then there's the Austrian Empire, because each of them will have concerns that the amount of power a large German state could take away from their two large countries and empire. Now, the leadership for the unification of Germany will come from the German state of Prussia. They've had some events so far in this chapter. They are centered around the city of Berlin, and they begin to expand their territory during the late 1700s, where they annexed parts of Poland. They fought a war against Austria and took different parts of land from them as well. So they're really the ones beginning to expand here. Now, from the Prussians, some of the things that we get from them is that they are by far the strongest military in Europe. They're not the largest, but they are the most regiment, they're the most disciplined army, and that really helps them because when war comes, as you'll see, they're pretty successful because they are such a diligent and disciplined group of people. The Zollverein was a free trade zone that the Prussians set up with other German states. Now, it excluded Austria because it comes down to whether or not Austria gets included or not, and the Prussians don't want them to be included because the Austrians are a power that the Prussians do not want to have their power checked by. So the Zollverein was actually one of the first kind of economic unions of Europe, similar to the European Union today, where it's a very large free trade zone, and all the German states were trading together and using a common currency. So there are some things set up ahead of the actual German unification, and the Zollverein is one of them. Now, within the Prussian German state, the Junkers, which is their nobility, they're the ones who will be pushing to help unify Germany through the 1860s and the 1870s. Now, what we're going to do first is you're going to need your chapter outline for both of the periods today. And for the chapter outline, you're going to first go to page 135. Now, on 135, at the top of the page, it is called German nationalists. So what you're going to begin is, in your notebook, you're going to write the heading, and then there are three main individuals that you are going to look at the chapter outline and identify what exactly their role in the unification process is. And you'll see in the chapter outline the reading's pretty short on each of them. By far the most important figure, his name is Otto von Bismarck. And what I have there is a list of some of the things you need to identify, such as his class. He makes a very well-known speech called the Blood and Iron speech. So, read the chapter outline, and within the notebook, outline what each of these individuals are responsible for when it comes to the process of German unification. Okay, you can go ahead and stop the tape right here. The video, students probably need about 5 to 7 minutes or so to complete the main players of German unification. And when they are done, then you can go ahead and restart the video. Okay, now what we see is three major guys, but really two of them are the most important. Helmut von Moltke. He is the Prussian leader of the military. So in other words, when Bismarck says, "Go here and take on the Danes," then that's who's leading the troops here. The two other ones, who are the two more important ones, is the first one is the current King of Prussia. His name is Wilhelm I. We would call him William, but Wilhelm I is his appropriate name. So when he becomes the King of Prussia, okay, he will begin the push for mobilizing the Prussian people in order to begin the enlargement of the army. Now, Prussia does have a parliament because previously the I can't even think of it. His name is Wilhelm I. He will give Prussia what they asked for during the revolutions of 1848. I believe the gentleman's name was Frederick Wilhelm, was the current King of Prussia at that time in 1848. He will grant the liberal constitution to the Prussian parliament in order to help avoid some of the revolutions of 1848. Now, he's dead, and now the new king is this gentleman here, Wilhelm I. He is a conservative. He knows that he is liberal. He has a liberal parliament, but he does not favor a liberal parliament. So he will be the one who eventually becomes the emperor of Germany once the unification process is done. But really, the person who is the architect behind it is Otto von Bismarck. Now, he was appointed Chancellor of Prussia in 1862 by Wilhelm I, and he's another one who he realizes that working through the parliament is not always the quickest and the most efficient, so he does most of his work really with his own power. He doesn't refer to the parliament at all, and Wilhelm I, he pretty much allows Bismarck to run things because he knows Bismarck is working towards the same goal as him, as unification of Germany. So what he's known as is one of his famous speeches called the Blood and Iron speech, which is pretty much where he declares that this process of unification is not going to be done peacefully, but it'll be done through blood and iron. So in other words, there's another term, and this is actually a term that's still used in politics today. It's called realpolitik, and it refers to politics. The reality of politics is that a lot of times force must be used, but the Germans, this originates with them because they are such a disciplined group of people who work hard and they believe in law and order. And throughout the 20th century, there are several wars where Germany is involved, and they are known as really good soldiers because they don't ever attempt to oppose their authority. They pretty much do what they're told. Okay, now we're going to go back to the chapter outline and begin looking at the Wars of Unification. So for this, you're going to go to page 135, and there'll be 135 and 136. What you're going to do right now is that you're going to do the first 3 wars. I'm sorry, the first 3 bullets. The first is the war against the Danes. Then there's the Austro-Prussian War. And then after that, you have the result, which is the creation of the North German Confederation. So you're going to put each of those headings in your notebook. And you're going to read in the chapter outline there's 2 sections on page 135. And that's it. So 135 will be your page here. Now, for the Austro-Prussian War, you want to write the heading and then leave yourself a little bit of space, probably about three or 4 lines, because I'm going to have something for you to add in there. And then leave the space and then pretty much summarize the events of what takes place with the Austro-Prussian War. And then do the results of the creation of the North German Confederation, and for that you don't need to leave any space. Alright, so right now we'll stop the video and go to the chapter outline, read the 2 sections on 135, and outline what exactly takes place with the first 2 wars of German unification. Okay, now to look at these first 2 wars. The first one takes place against the Danes, which are the people of Denmark, and probably the easiest thing is to look at this map. Prussia there is in the purplish color, and when you look at the top of the map, which I can use the arrow to show you here, pretty much we're dealing with the northern part of the German states right here. Now these are German-speaking people, but they're being controlled by the Danes, which are the people of Denmark up here. So the first war that Bismarck will undertake will be against this area called Schleswig-Holstein, and this will be an easy, successful war that the Prussians will take first, and it begins the consolidation of German territory in the northern part of the German states. Now, the second war is the Austro-Prussian War. Now what you need to do is you need to copy, I told you to leave that space underneath the heading, and it's for this right here. Now, as Prussia is beginning to unify, they know eventually they're going to have to come to blows with Austria, because Austria wants to be a part of the German state. They don't want the German state, but as they see the unification process beginning, they don't want to be excluded, because that's going to mean they're going to lose territory in the unification. So what happens then is Wilhelm I and Bismarck, they pretty much begin to use their diplomatic relations with other countries to help keep them out of the Austro-Prussian War. And they pretty much are able to keep Russia out of it. They're able to keep Napoleon III out of it. And there is an Italian city-state, Venetia, that was also fighting the Austrians at the time, and they told the Venetia that if you help the Prussians against the Austrians, when we finally defeat them, we will then give Venetia parts of the Austrian Empire, which made up northern Italy. So the war will take place between Austria and Prussia. Austria will be defeated here, and when the German state begins to unify, the Austrians are excluded, they're kicked out, and then the new German state is going to be made up of a 2-house legislature. So they're going to have, it's pretty much like a parliamentary type legislature. You have your king, who is Wilhelm I, and then you have your 2 houses of legislature. Now, the 2 houses, the Budenrat is the first one, and then the Reichstag is the second one. And something that's pretty different here is in the Reichstag, they're chosen by universal male suffrage. That's really not common yet in Europe. Prussia is one of the first states that actually grants universal suffrage to all of its male citizens. But what you have is, you have really the foundation here of what the German state's going to be made up of. Now, it's not complete yet, What you see on this map is you're looking at the purple area, you're looking at the gray area. So by 1867, which is when the war against Austria will be done, pretty much the northern part of Germany, if you follow the arrow around, okay, that's what we're looking at here. There is still a whole southern half that we'll have to deal with, and then there is this area over here as well that we'll have to deal with. Now, so to move on, what we're going to look at next is going to be the Franco-Prussian War. And to go back here, so the Franco-Prussian War, you're going to be back in the chapter outline on page 136, and you're going to write the heading, Franco-Prussian War, there's the date, and then also leave a little bit of space before, leave a little bit of space, write the heading and then leave a little bit of space after the heading, and then we'll add a couple of things in there. But so go to the chapter outline, read that section, which is on the top of page 136, and just continue to do an outline of what exactly is occurring, and then I will add in my part to it. So go ahead, you can stop the tape right now. Okay, now, with the Franco-Prussian War, kind of the story that is surrounding this, which the chapter outline doesn't really, they mention it, but I want to make sure that we understand it. So I guess the thing to make sure that you have down is kind of the build-up to this, which eventually it's called the Ems Dispatch, but the whole thing that happens is the Spanish throne is going to become vacant, and the Spanish, wanting to avoid another Bourbon taking the Spanish throne, decide to offer the throne to the Hohenzollern family, which is the ruling family of Prussia. Now, Napoleon III is not happy with this, because that to him is a slap in the face of the French, who've held the throne of Spain since 1714. So he's not going to be happy with this. Now, Wilhelm I, he's actually on vacation when this whole event is occurring, and Bismarck sees an opportunity here to take war on with France. And the German states and France, they've never really been allies with each other. Maybe during the 30 Years' War when it was the Catholics and Cardinal Richelieu, but other than that, they've really always been on the opposite sides of things. So Bismarck is going to receive a telegram from Wilhelm I, and what he does is he takes this telegram and he kind of docks it up and makes it appear that Prussia was pretty much on the receiving end of a threat from France, because William I not being there, he's pretty much relying on Bismarck to give him the information about what's going on here. So France sends a message to Wilhelm I. Wilhelm sends the message back to Bismarck, and eventually what happens is that Bismarck makes it appear that France is trying to push Prussia around. And at that point, Bismarck will keep in conversation with Wilhelm I, and eventually expresses his opinion towards Wilhelm that, hey, France is being aggressive towards us. So in return, then Bismarck is going to send a message back to France in which he makes it seem as though Prussia is now aggressive towards France. So the whole thing ends up with France declaring war on Prussia, when in the Ems Dispatch, France feels that Prussia is being aggressive. So it results in Prussia and France going to war. And during the war, Napoleon III will be captured, and the war will end in what we call the Treaty of Frankfurt, which is 1871. So at this point, I'm going to move on to the next map here. during the war with France, the southern states, which were mostly Catholic states down in the southern part of Germany, they ended up unifying with the northern states against France. So this is actually one of these moments where all of a sudden the people, they put religion aside and they end up unifying together against a common enemy. And that's really what you end up seeing, the new country of France declared in 1871 with Wilhelm I as its emperor there. And it's not a democracy, it's an autocracy, but it is a new country. It's going to become the most powerful country in Europe within a matter of a couple of years. Germany becomes this highly industrialized nation that's really the powerhouse of Europe, and we can credit that to Otto von Bismarck. Okay, so at this point, we are done with this lesson on the unification of Germany, and the next lesson is going to take us into the rise of Germany under the leadership of Otto von Bismarck. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then you can switch over to the second video and begin lesson 2.